Hey, Kev, let's follow this trail over here. This looks like there might be something waiting down there.
All right. Hey, wait a minute. Do you hear that?
Yeah, I thought it was just me. What the heck is that?
I don't know what that is. Whoa, do you smell that too?
That's unbelievable. Hey, look.
What the?
Hey, look, those branches are moving over there.
What the heck is that?
Holy cow, is that what I think it is? Look at that thing.
Oh my God.
It's a freaking Sasquatch. Welcome to the Bigfoot Terror in the Woods Sightings and Encounters podcast. I'm your host, W.J. Sheehan. Hello, everybody, and thank you once again for tuning in to our spectacular podcast. My name is W.J. Sheehan, and I am the author of a series of books entitled Bigfoot Terror in the Woods Sightings and Encounters, all of which you can buy volumes 1 through 8 at Amazon in ebook and paperback. And volumes 1 through 6 are on Audible, so if you want to plug and play, that's where you get them. And, by the way, I'm encouraging everybody once again to check out my new books, The Exorcist, Truth and Lies, Diabolica, and Full Moon. Ow! And let me begin today by welcoming in once again my brother, KJ Sheehan. How are you, Kev?
I'm good. How about you, Bill?
I am doing fantastic.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the moon chart, but it must be either getting full or waning from full, because I'm out here this weekend, out on the ocean. I'm looking out over the ocean last night, and it looked pretty big, that rising moon.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love looking at the moon, and it is actually a few days waning now. So.
Okay. Yeah, I saw Mars up there last night, close to it, and then off to the right you could see two of our favorite, Venus and Jupiter, right next to one another as well.
Yeah, it's awesome. I don't understand how anybody cannot be looking at the heavens.
I know, it's fantastic. I mean, even like Mars, when I looked up last night, I was like, wow, that looks like Mars. It's so red. And then I got out my handy-dandy iPhone app, and it was like Mars right in front of me. I was like, all right, that's pretty cool.
Fantastic. You know, Kev, before we get into our cryptids in the news and other oddities segment for today, I'd like to express my gratitude to our audience.
Well, I'm all in on that.
Yeah, great things are happening with this podcast. And we couldn't do anything without you, our listeners. And Kev, the more people I talk to, within the past couple of days, I was talking to Jim and Rick, two of our listeners, and I consider you guys friends of the podcast. And you know, if you were in my neck of the woods or I in yours, I could see myself breaking bread with you guys and having a good old time. So I really just so appreciative, Kev, of the audience that we have and what this podcast is turning out to be.
I'm with you, Bill. I mean, when we started out, honestly, folks, we didn't know if anybody would listen to us. We didn't know if our relatives would listen to us. And we have such a great following. The reviews are fantastic, by the way. Thank you so much for the reviews. And the viewer mail, Bill, I know that's what you're hitting on, but the viewer mail is fantastic.
Yeah, no, it is. And you know, Kev, when people comment that they've had an encounter or a sighting, I always get back to them and I like to talk to them. And that's what happened with me and Rick and Jim over the past week. And two outstanding guys, regular Joes, in my opinion, that had an encounter with the big-footed man.
Awesome.
And I'm telling you, man, once again, I get no inclination from either one of these gents that what they told me was not true. They're bizarre. It's a strange thing. Admittedly, everybody says, like, it was incredible. Like, what do you do? What do you say? I couldn't even pull my weapon. It's a weird thing. You're, like, stunned. And then it's over. So I understand it. I get it, because I've had a lot of encounters in my own life where I was left stunned. And I understand exactly what these people are talking about.
Right.
Fantastic.
Wild stuff.
Yep. Well, Kev, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. What do you got in store for us today in cryptids in the news and
Bill,
other oddities?
We're going to the swamp tonight.
I love the swamp.
We've been to the swamp before several times, and we're going back tonight. Tonight we're going to the swamp up in the northeastern United States.
Okay.
You know which one that is?
Go ahead.
The Hockomock.
Oh, the freaking Hockomock Swamp.
That's FHS for the rest of you guys. Yeah, this is up in Massachusetts, as you know, and it is a creep fest up there. And it's been a creep fest since like the 1700s, maybe earlier.
Yeah, it's amazing how much history is behind some of these locations.
Oh, it's super cool. Yeah, like you read about, and we'll talk about the different tribe of Native Americans that had problems there, the colonialists that had problems there, right up till now. People running into problems there.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, and once again, I'm reading a book right now on positive affirmations. And not that has anything to do with what we're talking about, but the woman commented that wouldn't it be nice when we were young and in school if people taught you how to invest money, how to enjoy life, instead of memorizing battle dates in the Civil War and, I mean, you get the point.
Oh, come on, Bill. That stuff's overrated. Personal happiness? Come on.
Yeah. I mean, it's just bizarre. But here we are talking about the Hockomock tonight. This place is a hotbed for strange activity. And how many people have ever even heard of the Hockomock Swamp?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, living in the Northeast for a long time. Now I'm in the Southeast for the last 20 years, but I actually didn't hear about it until I started researching the cryptid stuff.
Yeah, amazing. So shoot, bro. What do you got?
Yeah. So first off, where is this Hockomock Swamp? So, if you're in downtown Boston, you get your compass out, you head dead south, and you're about halfway to hitting the Long Island Sound / Atlantic Ocean, whatever it is down there. About halfway between Boston and the ocean, the big body of water, that's the Hockomock Swamp.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you don't think of swamp. When I think of swamp, all of my entire being, kind of goes south.
Right.
I think
absolutely.
Okefenokee, the Everglades.
The Okefenokee, you think Arkansas, Alabama, Florida, which they have good swamp there, but apparently they got some good swamp in Massachusetts too. You
can't deny the good people of Massachusetts.
You can't take the good swamp away from those Massachusettsites.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah,
all right. So where are we going in this swamp?
So first off, the swamp, like say you're going up there and you want to hang out for a while, it's pretty close to a place to stay there called the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast. I kid you not, but you can stay there, and that's the same place where in 1892 somebody killed Lizzie Borden's parents with an axe. Of course, she wasn't convicted of the crime, so I'm not saying it was her.
Right, but she left town posthumously afterwards.
She did. And by the way, a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight comes from an article that was in the Boston Globe, the main periodical of the Boston area in October of 2005, so it goes back a ways. But pretty. I pulled from some other places too, but pretty good article in the Boston Globe.
Okay.
Yeah. So this place, the Hockomock Swamp, for hundreds of years, it's been a hotbed of reported sightings of whether it's the hairy man or just general supernatural events or just scary negative things going on. Right.
Well, let's get at it.
Oh, yeah, we're going in there. So, the Native Americans from that area of Massachusetts are called the Wampanoag. And they gave that swamp its name, Hockomock. And Hockomock means place where spirits dwell.
Great.
Yeah, and usually when you're talking about a place where spirits dwell, it's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, they're typically evil spirits.
Not usually happy spirits.
Yeah, what the word would have been for the happy place. They didn't pick that.
The happy place, yeah. So the Wampanoag, by the way, they met a lot of misfortune in the same area around the swamp. And in 1615 to 1619, so over a 4-year period, the Wampanoag suffered an epidemic and almost wiped out the entire tribe. So, that epidemic is long suspected to be smallpox, but never confirmed actually what it was that, nearly wiped out the entire tribe.
Now, smallpox was brought over by the Europeans, right?
Yes.
So I guess they were around in the early 1600s.
They were.
Okay.
So they were up there in New England, especially, and in Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And so by the way, speaking of the English, the early colonialists, the English colonialists, what do you think they named this place?
Hell on earth.
Close. The Devil's Swamp.
Great. Great. So I wasn't far away with my guess.
Close, and I meant it. You were right in there. I'd give you full points for that. Hell on Earth or Devil's Swamp.
Yeah, so isn't it interesting how two entirely different peoples came up with their own name for this area, and both of them were not too good.
No, I would say without a doubt, not too good.
Wow.
So this Hockomock Swamp, by the way, it's crossed by a number of roads and some pretty big roads, including Route 24 and Route 138 up there in Massachusetts, an old railroad bed, acres of black rivers, marshes, ponds, cedar groves, maple trees, thickets, twisting vines, and get this, sinkholes and quicksand.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Not to cut into this, but at some point, I'm going to be delivering an account to our podcast that involves a Bigfoot almost losing its life in quicksand.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll be getting somewhere down the road. We'll be getting back to that. But go ahead, Kev.
That one, yeah. So, human artifacts in the swamp have been dated at some 9,000 years old. So,
wow.
Humans of some sort have been roaming around the edges of this swamp or in the middle of the swamp for almost 9,000 years. So pretty crazy.
Incredible.
Yeah. And
I bet you, Kev, if you could get down into that muck, you'd probably find some remains, human and otherwise.
Oh, no doubt about it. Perfect place.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll find a woolly mammoth, too.
What's that place where the dinosaurs were found, the tar pits?
That's what I was thinking. That's why I said maybe we'll find a woolly mammoth, too.
Yeah. Just, right? What is that place? The Ambrea? I can't even think of it right now. But those tar pits.
Yeah.
Where a lot of animals got too close and couldn't escape.
Exactly. They slipped in and couldn't get out. Same thing.
Yeah.
So, over the generations, many have believed that the Hockomock has some problems associated with it, whether it be like evil spirits, like we talked about, strange animals, but lots and lots of stories. So get this. There's stories of vicious giant dogs with red eyes. Oh, yeah, you love the red eyes.
Oh, man, you just can't get away from it,
I
though.
know.
What is with the red eyes? It's got to be a demonic thing.
I know. Well, get this. A flying creature that resembled a pterodactyl,
Wow.
maybe a Mothman-like creature.
Yeah.
I know. Native American ghosts paddling canoes.
Great.
And glowing things hovering above the trees.
There you go with the orbs and whatnot.
And finally, last but not least, there's also talk of a shaggy, half man, half ape seen shuffling around through the woods.
There you go.
Hello.
I mean, it's a freaking potpourri of
The potpourri of evilness.
yeah. It's like a salad bowl of everything creepy.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, and think about that, Kev. All of these like semi-major thoroughfares crossing over it, people riding by it, and this and that every day of their lives. And how many people actually know what's lurking around them in that area?
Oh, 100%, Bill. No doubt about it.
Very strange indeed.
And then, so there's also, if this wasn't enough for you, there have been reports of satanic rituals conducted in the swamp.
There you go. I mean, I knew that had to be a part of it.
I know,
because,
that's why I went there. I knew you were onto the smell of the trail already.
Yeah, you know,
And
these
there we
people.
go. I didn't even have to mention that there was a goat man near the bridge. There wasn't really a goat man, but you get my drift.
Well, that we know of.
That we know of.
Yeah, he's yet to come.
Exactly.
Horned freaking goat man. You know, these satanic rituals are involved in more things than people will ever know. I mean, there are people out there who are calling in evil of every sort, and they're in for a rude awakening. I mean, you know, they're going to have their time and this and that, but these folks are in for a rude awakening.
You know me, Bill. It scares the crap out of me even when we talk about it. Like, I'm like...
Yeah, conjuring evil. It's
No,
definitely...
thank you.
Yeah, it's definitely not on the list of things to do.
Yeah. So we got an interesting sighting here that I'm going to bring to you from a gentleman by the name of Joe DeAndrade. And Joe thinks that the swamp may be the habitat of a creature that is yet to be identified.
Wow.
Yeah, and in 1978, so going back a ways, when Joe was 24 years old, and he was standing on the shore of one of the creeks there, or a pond there, his back was to the water, and he says, I was standing there, and for some reason, I had to turn around. It was a chill or something inside me. And I turned around, and there off to the right, maybe 200 yards away, was this well. I don't know what it was. It was a creature that was all brown and hairy, like a big apish and man thing. It was making its way for the woods, but I didn't stick around to watch where it was going. I ran for the street.
Wow.
Yeah, what does that sound like?
Well, definitely a Bigfoot, man.
Definitely a Bigfoot, right?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it.
No doubt about it.
So when people write in and they say, where are the Bigfoots, WJ and KJ? The Bigfoot is all over the place.
Exactly. I mean, it's in Boston, outside of Boston.
Right, Massachusetts, right?
Yeah.
You're not thinking, Massachusetts, hotbed for Bigfoot activity.
Yep.
Well, what did this guy see? Sounds like a Bigfoot to me.
Sounds like a hairy man.
Yeah, no doubt about
And
it.
here's another one, okay? John Baker, about 5 years later, he's a veteran fur trapper in that region, was about a half a mile from his West Bridgewater home on a canoe in a river in the swamp, laying muskrat lines on a winter night. Paddling along in the quiet, Baker heard a loud crash and a rumble of an animal in the nearby woods. Frozen by fear, he said a large hairy beast slogged into the river and passed within a few yards of him.
Wow.
Yeah, and he says, I knew it wasn't a human because when it passed by me, I could smell it.
Wow.
Yeah, it smelled like a skunk, musty and dirty.
Wow.
Yeah.
Within a few yards.
Few yards, in the dark, middle of the night.
Right. And obviously he's in a canoe. You can assume at that time he may have just been drifting or...
Oh, yeah, well, he was setting these lines and, paddling along, I'm sure, just trying to make a living. And so Baker died in 2001, and until his death, he always maintained that, although he spent 30 years of his life trapping in the same swamp, he never saw such a thing before that point in time or since that point in time.
Wow.
So again, Bill, we talk about somebody that definitely has experience, So if someone's going to say, "Oh, maybe it was a bear," no, it wasn't a bear.
Yeah.
He knows what a bear looks like.
Absolutely.
He's
and
an
you know
outdoorsman.
what?
He's a trapper.
Yeah. I told you I was talking with Jim and Rick. Both of these guys were hunters. Both of them knew the areas well that they were in. Both of them knew their surrounds. When they tell you they saw something out of the ordinary and identified it as a Bigfoot, well, you know what? That's what they saw.
Yeah, let's not bet against them.
Yeah, no, not at all. I'm not a betting man, and I trust my instincts, and they trust their instincts, and this is what happened to them, and this is what happened to this other guy setting his muskrat nets.
Yep, absolutely.
Crazy.
So get this. There's a guy named Chris Pittman, and, he focuses on all things paranormal. Mm-hmm. And he was focused on the Hockomock Swamp for about 10 years of his life. And he says that the way the swamp evolved, going all the way back in time, from the glaciers sliding across there to the mounting of alluvium deposits, to the death and decay of plants that created the swamp's thick bedding, like a peat-like bedding. Mm-hmm. It may have resulted in a gravitational anomaly that allows for the weird and unexplained to happen. And Bill, what does that sound like?
It sounds like demonic activity to me.
Yeah, but it also sounds a little bit like what they were touching on in the Skinwalker Ranch, right? That there's something under the ground that's causing this stuff to happen.
And attractant to the area, like people claim the ley lines of the earth pass below Stonehenge.
And it creates some type of vortice or window into another dimension, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's...
Yeah, so this guy Pittman talks about that. And then when you go all the way back to the early 1900s, there have been several reported sightings of UFOs in this area of the swamp. And we're talking about the early 1900s. So it's like, come on, there weren't any flying objects back then.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you saw something flying back then, it was a real anomaly because the only thing you saw flying was a bird.
Exactly. That was it.
Yep. Hawks, birds, whatever you want, geese, ducks. That was it.
Yep. And then we advance in time to 1999, and a local resident named Courtney Cullen says she saw what she believes to be a UFO that summer while on a cookout in Bridgewater near Lake Nipponicket. You got to love these names up there. And a good portion of that lake is in the Hockomock Swamp. And she says, suddenly there was noise, and it was wicked loud. And I put in here a translation, like if you're from Boston, that means it was really loud. Wicked good, wicked loud. Hey, it was wicked loud. And next, she says there were lights in the sky, no color, but just bright lights. They were descending fast, like coming straight at the house behind where we were at the cookout. And just as it seemed the lights were going to crash into the house, they darted sideways at this unbelievable speed, and soon they just disappeared.
Really remarkable, right?
Pretty wild, right?
Yeah, I don't know how many of our listeners have had any UFO encounters. I told you I've had a few of them. Really incredible when you see these objects in action. They just defy everything that we know in our reality.
Yeah.
And it's shocking. It's freaking shocking. When you see it. It's like, whoa!
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Yeah, very interesting.
And then the last point about this swamp, going all the way back in history, like, if we start to think about, evil things being conjured up in this region, and you start to say, well, what could create that kind of a thing? Well, it turns out there was a war back then called King Philip's War in 1675 and 1676, so basically a year long. And it was a huge conflict between the English settlers and the Native Americans of the region. And it took place right in and around the swamp, right?
Okay.
And when you go back and you read the history of this time and this war, both sides committed crimes against women and children, and the swamp saw some of the bloodiest massacres to ever happen in America. So, that's enough for me.
Yeah, the energy surrounding that is just really bad.
Yeah.
Incredible. By the way, people, if you just heard a couple of Harley Davidsons go by, I think 2 or 3 of them just went throttling past my abode.
It wasn't me, Bill. I'm here recording this.
And no Bigfoots was sighted.
Oh, okay. Well, was there a Bigfoot on one of the Harleys?
Oh, my goodness. So that's incredible,
yeah,
Kev.
So that is the Hockomock Swamp. We'll probably do some more on this, but it is, definitely a legitimate creepy place, definitely a desolate place where Bigfoot could be, no doubt about it, with a couple of these sightings. And then certainly a place where there could be some type of evil, satanic, whatever energy, and maybe even a vortex or window into another dimension based on, some of these geologic things that are present there.
Yeah, the swamp is a weird thing. I think, don't hold me to it, I think it was Henry David Thoreau that loved swamps. I think it was him, and he commented that he loved a good swamp. They were like a place of serenity and this and that. But I think to most people, especially if you knew the type of activity that was going on, a swamp is kind of a scary place, right?
Oh, I don't like snakes, so swamps are pretty freaking creepy for me.
Yeah, especially if you go down south, with the moccasins.
Well, that's where I am, brother.
Yeah, it's not a good haven.
We're not walking through the swamps here. I'm not. People do, but not me.
Now, before I get into this, I want to say something here. First of all, I'm not certain we ever talked about this before. And if we did, I just want to re-up to the listeners that there are always new people to Bigfoot. Some people have never heard of the Patty film. Some people are wondering what Bigfoot is. And then, of course, we always have new listeners to the podcast. They're coming in by the boatload. And not everybody's going to go back to podcast 1 and listen all the way through, which I know a lot of you have done. And some have listened multiple times, which is amazing to me. But this is one of the wildest accounts on record, for me anyway. And if we've done it before, it was worth re-upping and talking about this again, because this is going to blow your mind. This rather chilling account was brought to my attention by a bowhunter by the name of Shane Barkley. This is what Shane had to share about what happened to him one early September morning. As I mentioned to you when I first contacted you, Bill, this was the craziest damn thing imaginable. If it hadn't happened to me personally, I wouldn't believe it. I still live and hunt in Tennessee, but I haven't been back into this area that I am about to tell you about since the day of this incident, and with good reason. Prior to September 14th of 2014, this was one of my all-time best hunting spots without exception. On this particular day, the forecast was for clouds and drizzle in the morning, with skies clearing in the afternoon. I had hiked in about a half mile or so to a place where I always left a stand fixed in a tree. In fact, I had just replaced this stand because the old one that was there was getting rusty. That should tell you something in and of itself as to just how fond I was of this spot. The area was comprised of some of the thickest, most tightly packed forests that you will ever navigate. The bushes and trees in here, starting from the ground level and working their way up, were layered in height and density. If not for the occasional game trail, I don't believe that anyone in their right mind would attempt coming in here. But nobody ever said that I was in my right mind. I had made my way into this location and was already comfortably sitting in the stand just at the break of dawn. My stand was fixed at a height of about 25 feet, with climbing pins turned into the tree leading all the way up to it. I'm going to do my best to describe to you exactly where I was sitting and what it was that I could and could not see, as well as telling you why it was that I had chosen this area for my stand in the first place. This patch of forest was what I will call a depression within a depression. The surrounding area was a valley in between a pair of hills that were around 600 feet in elevation. There was an old and well-used game trail that ran just to the left of my stand and off due north, which was directly in front of me when sitting in the stand. The vast majority of the brush was between 4 and 8 feet tall, which one could by no means hunt in unless you could rise above it and look down on the trail. On most days, as was the case on this morning, this bowl was filled with a damp, foggy mist that would eventually dissipate, but not until generally around 9 a.m. or later. My sight range from the seat was about 75 feet at best in all directions, and then the trees and brush seemed to vanish in the midst. It's a very ethereal thing to sit in a place like this alone, and it has even spooked me on more than one occasion. I was sitting in hopes of my prey coming down the trail at any moment when I began to hear what I will describe to you as being owls. There were little hoots and screeches coming in succession. It had started as one and then progressed to the point where there were numerous screeches and hoots, all of which were coming from directly in front of me to my north. Being a hunter, it's virtually impossible for me to share with you in a few moments why I say what I am about to say to you. But the fact of the matter is and was that these sounds were not real. In other words, to my trained ears, knowing what the area's owls sound like, how they make their calls, and what time of day they make their calls, I knew these were being faked. Simply put, something or someone was mimicking the owl calls. One of the most telling aspects was the amount of calls being made and the fact that they were all in one area. Now, the imagination can play some strange tricks on one's mind, especially when you're alone in the midst in such a location. I began to feel a sense of dread, and a cold chill ran down my body, a shiver, if you will. At that moment in time, and for the first time since I had been coming in here, which must have been several dozen or more, I was wishing I had brought a gun instead of my bow. I had never felt this way before, and I just said it was as though, I had never felt this way before, as I just said. It was as though my psychological state was taking a terrible tumble out of control, and there was nothing I could do to control my thoughts and emotions in the moment. As if things couldn't get any worse, they did. There was so much hooting and screeching going on that it sounded like a war party was going on in the fog in front of me. The thought had crossed my mind to climb down out of the stand and make my way out, but that thought was countered by that of just staying put, because I would be safer sitting off the ground. My heart was racing, and sweat was actually dripping from my brow. I couldn't believe how frightened I was, and it was escalating. And what happened next was beyond belief. If you have never sat in or seen a folding tree stand, I was sitting on the seat portion, and my feet were resting on what I will call the floor of the stand. You can see through the entire stand and its components because it is more of a weave of steel as opposed to being solid plate, which is done to keep it as lightweight as possible. My back was against this tree, which was maybe 16 inches in diameter, and I was, as I say, about 25 feet off the ground, which to me means that my feet were about 20 feet off the ground. As I sat there, trembling, sweating, and by the way, having seen nothing up until this point, I suddenly felt something grab the heel of my left boot. I immediately jumped to the point of almost falling out of the stand, and as I turned my head to look down to my left, I was staring into the grimacing face of a huge Sasquatch. He was looking directly up at me, having snuck up behind me, and was reaching up with his left hand to grab hold of my boot. The very moment that I jumped, he let go and just stood there, kind of swaying and watching me. As he stood there, the thought ran through my mind that all of the rest of the activity and noises were just a distraction, which allowed this beast to walk up on me unaware. The thought of putting a broadhead right between his eyes was just one of many thoughts that was racing through my mind. I expected at any moment that he was going to grab the foot tray and yank the stand out of the tree to devour me. The size of this thing was unbelievable, and I don't expect you or anyone else to believe me either. He was grabbing at my heel with his hand 20 feet off the ground. You can do the math as to what type of size that equates into. It was just seconds after he had held my heel that he let go. The funny thing was that the grasp was not done with much, if any, pressure at all. It was as if he wanted me to know that he could do whatever he wanted, including sneaking up on me and touching me. He then turned and walked straight down the trail in front of me, and as he did so, all of the noises had stopped. The woods had suddenly and unexpectedly become dead silent. I think he took about 10 steps to cover 75 feet, which was about what I could see, as I told you, and disappeared into the mist and the trees. It was at that moment that I realized I was peeing in my pants. I have no idea why. Call it caused by trauma or whatever you will, but I was peeing in my pants. I leaned with my back against a tree for almost 2 hours in somewhat of a delirium, feeling as though I was on some type of hard narcotic, which had rendered me unable to think or act, and so I sat. I remember looking at my watch at 9:30 a.m. when I decided to move down the ladder. Everything at that moment in time was happening in slow motion. At least that's the way I perceived it. It seemed as though it took 20 minutes to get down the ladder, after which I sat under the tree for another half hour or more. I was staring down the trail where the Bigfoot had walked away, and I have no idea why. I was in a complete and utter daze. I remember looking at my watch when I finally had reached the car, and it was almost noon, having begun my morning in the stand only a half a mile away from where I had parked to begin the hike in. It was as if after this encounter and during it as well, that time had stood still. Yes, it was still passing, but I was totally and completely disconnected from reality. That week, I called out of work sick for 8 days. It took me that long to recover from this stupor. I went back into the spot many months later, after winter had set in, and as I stood beneath the stand, I tried to make some sense out of the events of that day. I looked up at the seat and visualized him reaching up and grabbing my boot. To do so, he would have had to have been 14 or 15 feet tall, with his arm extended beyond that. His arm would have had been 7 or 8 feet long. The game trail was only perhaps 2.5 feet wide, and this beast with its back to me seemed to be at least 3 times the trail's width at its shoulders. It had long gray and white hair with dark gray skin, and that was visible on its face and hands, as well as the upper chest as I looked down at it. Thinking back, the face seemed to have an incredibly evil smile. But is that just how I was perceiving him? Perhaps, as Bigfoot go, he was handsome and actually smiling at me. The fact is that he grabbed my boot very gently. He could have easily torn me from that chair and from the tree, and that would have been the end of it and me, but he didn't. That's what has left me so puzzled. When he was walking away from me, I felt as though anesthesia was taking effect before a surgery. At that moment in time, when suddenly you are drifting off, and then you can remember no more. However, I had taken nothing, and had only the encounter to blame it on. It was the most bizarre event of my lifetime, and now you are a part of it.
Whoa.
What do you think of that, Kev?
Just getting to the end of it, I mean, the description of being under anesthesia, and dozing off just prior to a surgery, that's pretty interesting, right?
Yeah,
it's
well,
weird.
he talked about all of this passage of time that was almost unaccountable.
Right, which is just like a surgery, right? Where you wake up and you're like, did we do it? Oh, yeah, okay.
What just happened?
Yeah.
And he did look at his watch at 9:30. But then he commented he didn't get back to his car, which was only a half mile away till noon.
Yeah, that's weird.
And getting into the woods at sunrise.
Yeah, very strange. And then, by the way, just whenever someone says it had an evil smile, but maybe it was just handsome, come on. If you think it was evil, it was evil.
Yeah. Well, you know what he's saying.
I get it. I'm just saying.
You know how we judge people sometime by their appearances, and then you get to know somebody, and you're like, "Holy smoke! Boy, was I ever wrong."
Yeah, I don't know if that applies to evil smiles on Bigfoots, though, that are 14 feet tall. I'm just saying, okay?
Yeah. But again, I've talked about this before, Kev, where people make a judgment call. I don't know. He says 25 feet and his feet were at 20 feet. That would be one big bugger.
Oh, I mean, the biggest one we've ever talked about, I think. But I'm just saying, I might be on my second magazine by the time I figured out if his smile was really evil or not. And by folks, second magazine, I don't mean Sports Illustrated.
Yeah, we're talking Gun Magazine. By the way, folks, this gentleman, Shane Barkley, just re-upped my feelings exactly when he said, I was wishing I had a gun instead of my bow.
Yeah.
Get the picture?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can ratchet off a lot more lead than you can arrows.
Exactly. You don't have to use it. When you're out there with your hunting license, that's a bow hunting license, that's fine. But in case you run into something that you weren't hunting for,
yeah.
There you go.
There you go.
Maybe something that's 14 feet tall that's hunting for you.
I'll tell you, man, that is one of the creepiest circumstances I could imagine. He's being inundated by these calls that he thinks are fake.
Yep.
So that in itself is like blowing his mind. Like, what the heck is going on here? And then this thing, he feels the pressure on his boot heel.
That is the freakiest thing, Bill. Like you're hearing all these owls and stuff like that. And you're like, what the heck is going on? There's a lot of calls. And then all of a sudden you feel some pressure on your boot heel while you're up in a tree stand. I mean, holy crap, right? I mean.
Yeah, talk about nowhere to run.
What the heck?
Remember Martha Reeves? Nowhere to run, baby. Nowhere to hide.
There you go.
One of my favorite old Motown hits.
There you go.
And he was in that predicament, man. There was nowhere to go except maybe climb up further by hand.
Yeah. Which is not looking too good when you got a 14-foot beast below you.
Yeah, well, think of what he could have done. He could have just went hand over hand and ripped them out of the tree.
Yeah, maybe just ripped a tree out of the ground with you in it.
Yeah, just knock it over.
All right.
Well, that's it, man. So, incredible encounter. I mean, I love all encounters. In fact, Rick and Jim had some night. Rick saw a Bigfoot on a cut while hunting in the woods. Came out of the cut, walked along the woods in front of a downed tree, and then kind of ducked back in. He had a real good look at it. And then Jim was up in Northern California. Forgive me, Jim, if I...
Hey, Bill, by the way, Jim's letter is one that I'm going to go through tonight.
All right, so we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
We'll just get into it and talk about it a little bit.
Because that one's super cool.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into our listener mail, Kevin.
Yeah, let's go. So let's start out with Jim. Let's
all right.
Cut the suspense. So his sighting, and I'm going by the letter. You spoke to him, Bill. I just read the letter. But
right.
This is a Bigfoot sighting going back to October 1977. Mm-hmm. And Jim writes, he's been listening to quite a few different Bigfoot podcasts, and I've heard of a lot of what he calls BS stories. I'm guessing that's not Bigfoot stories, but it means something else, but this is a family show. He says, I know that because of my 30-year law enforcement career with extensive training in interviewing and interrogation. So here's another sighting by somebody who was in law enforcement, right?
Yeah, and by the way, he's retired for, I think, about 5 years.
And he says, that being said, I really like your podcast platform, and I find the stories of encounters, for the most part, very believable. The last week in October 1977, I had a Sasquatch come within 30 feet of me and my friend Terry, also known as Fish. Good friend when you can call him Fish. They were deer hunting in Northern California in the east part of Shasta County. We were on the edge of Lassen National Park. The exact place is called Brookfield Meadows. And he says, Fish and I drove separately because we were going up for an evening hunt and we worked a ways apart from one another. This is a very remote place, and we had not seen any other hunters or vehicles for 10 miles or so. When we got out of our pickups, we both had a very eerie feeling. Like many people have said, we felt like we were being watched. Mm-hmm. This area is right at the tree line of Mount Lassen, an active volcano there, huge rocks the size of a house all over, and old-growth fir trees. We've hunted this place for many years and knew the country well, and just how to hunt it. So Fish and I separated by 100 yards or so and started our push. We had walked up a hill a quarter mile or so when I heard Fish started to yell, "Who are you?" Then he started yelling, "Say something or I'm going to start shooting." And at that point, the manzanita brush started to sound like a D8 was dozing through it and coming toward me. I was about 15 or 20 feet above the trail as I was climbing a huge rock that I knew was a good vantage point to hunt from. So when the commotion started, I froze. Within seconds, what I thought to be Fish emerged from the manzanita. Then I realized this was something I had never seen before. It stopped below me on the trail and was turned away from me and looking back towards the direction of Fish. I was so scared and shocked to be seeing this creature. Excuse me. I had a 7mm Rem mag in my hands, but never thought about shooting. I was literally frozen stiff. I don't think I was even breathing. I don't think the creature knew I was there. If it did, he didn't look in my direction. It seemed like an eternity that it was stopped and looking back.
Wow.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
I will try and describe what I saw. Like I said, it was looking around to its left side. Its whole torso was turned, like it could or didn't rotate its neck. Its arms were bent about 90 degrees, like it was about ready to sprint. It was covered in a brownish-black hair. There seemed to be less hair on its arms. I had a good look at its back and the back of its head. The head was slightly conical, with a short neck, if any neck. The hair on its head was longer than the rest of its body. It was breathing very deeply, like its lungs were 55-gallon drum size. It was tall, but the width was its most notable feature. You could have hidden a sheet of plywood behind it or even beside it. I only had a profile glimpse of its face. It looked very human-like. The nose looked flatter than a human's. Like I said, it seemed like an eternity, but it was probably 10 seconds from the time it came into sight. Then it grunted, then took 2 or 3 steps that covered about 10 or 15 yards and disappeared behind another big rock formation. I then realized Fish was screaming, "Let's get out of here."
Yeah.
I then took off, going straight down the hill. I didn't want to be on the game trail that I had hiked up because that is where the Sasquatch came up. And it was the crow's flight back to where we had parked. Fish and I reached the meadow at about the same time. He was about 50 yards off the pickups, and I was about 50 west of, he was about 50 yards east of the pickups, and I was about 50 yards west of the trucks. We sprinted to the pickups. About the time we got to the pickups, rocks the size of bowling balls were coming in from above. Whoa.
Yeah.
We both said at the same time, "Let's get out of here." We got into pickups and flew out of the meadow as fast as the pickups would go. We didn't slow down until we got to the highway about 12 miles away. We stopped at the Shingletown store about another 15 miles. Our heart rate was still through the roof. Fish told me that this critter had started to stalk him shortly after we got out of the pickups. It started peeking at him from a grove of fir trees. He thought at first it was a man. Then it stepped out of the grove. That's when he started yelling. That is what he was going to shoot. Then he said down below, he said he got down below the lower rocks and it was gone. We didn't tell many people of the encounter. However, I told my dad, and he told me that he had seen one 20 years prior.
Wow.
Yeah, again, we hear that, right? Mm-hmm, and where he saw one was in the winter range of the area that I was hunting. I grew up in the timber country of northeast California in Plumas County in a town named Greenville. It was about 1,200 residents and 3 sawmills. So everyone in town worked in the sawmills or logged in the surrounding woods. There were a lot of people like me. There was a Sasquatch encounter, but people didn't talk much about it. I still get excited and goosebumps when I think about that afternoon, and very few days go by that I don't think about it. Pretty cool, Bill.
Yeah, just incredible. And by the way, no cameras were present and nobody snapped a picture.
Yeah, that would have been pretty frightening.
Yeah, I'm joking, Ken, right? Of course, everyone, where are the pictures? Where's this? Where's that? Like
well, that
you're
was a while
superhuman.
back, too. 1977, right? Like, you weren't really carrying a camera around while you were hunting.
Yeah, well,
Especially
according
at
to some
night.
people. Yeah, according to some people, though, you should have a camera with you at all times.
And be ready to use it. And if you do use it, don't let the shot be shaky.
Right. And by the way, neither Jim nor his friend Fish decided to stay around and put some offerings out for the Bigfoot.
Little trade or anything?
They jumped in the truck, floored it, and didn't stop till they got the shingle down.
No, they split.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, just an incredible encounter, Jim had told me that I think his friend was, last name was Trout or Troutman.
Oh, so that's the name, Fish.
Yeah, and he took up the name Fish from his friends.
Very cool. All right. Well, we're going from there, Northern California, to France. The land of France, to Francois in Lannion, France.
Wow.
Yeah, and Francois, I've been to Lannion, so cue the James Bond music. Din, 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 din. But Lannion
in the
is
casino?
Beautiful. And he says, Francois says, need to hear some more about the Rougarou, especially going back to my homeland of France. Do you think that your Rougarou is somehow connected to the creature that was repeatedly seen in France? Au revoir, Francois.
Wow.
What do you think, Bill? I know we talked about it, that, you got this wolf-man-like creature or creature that turns from man to wolf, like the definition goes, in France, that was seen back into the Dark Ages in France. And then, of course, we see it mostly in Louisiana, but also other places around the U.S. You think they're connected more than in name, where Rougarou is really a French name?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, Kev, my take entirely on the Rougarou is that this is a demonic entity. And whether or not it's the same one or a grouping of them that appear the same way in different locations, it really doesn't matter because they know no boundaries like us.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't need to hop on a freighter and travel over here or back to France, But I think this is some type of demon, and this is how it appears, this half man, half wolf, to frighten the bejeebus out of people.
Yeah.
It's a way different entity than the Bigfoot that we commonly know here. Of course, we're talking now about the flesh and blood Bigfoot.
Right.
The ones that seem to vanish, or the glowing red eyes, or being attached to a UFO sighting.
Yeah, the
that's
ones
an
that
entirely...
don't leave footprint as they hover across the snow, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's free. You remember that one we did on the disappearing man, I called it. Remember that guy smoking cigarettes and the cigarette didn't burn?
Yes, exactly. And the same thing. It was in the snow, and they went up the trail, and there was no footprints.
Right. They were chasing the Bigfoot initially that crossed the trail.
100%, yeah.
But when they went back, there were no footprints in the snow.
No footprints in the snow. I mean, like you said, a non-flesh and blood Bigfoot.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Something otherworldly.
Yeah, just actually, it wasn't snow; it was mud.
Oh, okay, mud. Okay. Oh, yeah, but I know what it was. But the guy they ran into who saw it with them had on like these brand new white shoes, right? That didn't have any mud on them, although he just came down this muddy trail.
That's right. He was wearing white boat sneakers. That's what I was thinking. It was like
snow,
sneakers.
But it wasn't snow. It was his shoes were white as snow. Awesome. All right, Bill. Well, that's it for the viewer mail. Some great stuff this week, folks. And keep it real. Stay connected to us. Keep the letters coming. And also, thank you so much for the terrific 5-star reviews, Bill. They keep pouring in, and it's fantastic. If you haven't left us a 5-star review yet, please leave one today or tonight, whenever you're listening to this. And the 5-star reviews are really important because they bring new listeners to the podcast. And as we get new listeners, Bill and I can continue to improve the quality of the podcast. So thank you so much. Please keep the 5-star reviews coming. And thanks for listening.
Awesome. Yeah, and folks, get out there and buy 1 or 2 of my books. Give them to a friend. Give them as a little birthday present to somebody. You'd be doing a big service for me personally. And by the way, if you find yourself out and about in the Hockomock Swamp or anywhere else this fine week ahead of us, remember, don't be like the Bowhunter in the tree stand. Always carry more gun than you think you're gonna need. Sleep tight.